Look around at the person next to you and say, you're an angel. Right? Here we go. We are a room full of angels, and we need each other to fly. I love that message, and I love Karen Drucker, and that was so beautiful. So I'm going to bring some part of that back into the talk. But today I'm going to begin by sharing a rather famously known, well-known story. It's a story from the Bible. How many of you have ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Okay, I figured most of us have. Now, before I begin the story, I want to share that Unity's approach to the Bible is one of metaphysics, as we recognize that every person, place, and situation and story represents some aspect of our own beingness. That it is actually a story of the consciousness of our being and the parts of our being that need to elevate into a higher level of consciousness. And so it's about the evolution of consciousness from a sense-based consciousness to a truth-based consciousness. So the story that I'm sharing today is David and Goliath. Now, this begins with the Israelites, and the Israelites represent the part of us, our true nature. It represents the love and truth nature of our being. And they're at war with the Philistines. And the Philistines are a fear-based, egocentric group of beings, but that's the part of us that is more fear-based, and we buy into illusions. So these two parts of ourselves are in battle. The part of us, true nature, and the part of us that has been conditioned by the world and its thoughts. So there's these two parts that are at war, David and or the Philistines and Israelites. And David is a shepherd. He's a scrawny little guy, and he can't be a part of the soldiers. And the soldiers are facing each other, but there comes this big 9-foot man in armor, big, threatening man who's yelling, you send one person and they can defeat me, basically, then we'll surrender to you. Well, there's terror. The Israelites are terrorized by this giant of a man. It's sure death. No one's going to take him up. Well, David gets some food from his father, and he brings it to his brothers who are at the front lines. And David hears about this Goliath and hears the threats, and he's like, I'll fight him. And they're looking at him, and they're laughing. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're dead meat. You're just going to be slaughtered. So, no. Well, he persisted and persisted. So they finally said, all right, we're going to take you to King Saul and see what he says. Well, King Saul was reluctant and said, no, David, thanks for your courage and your craziness, but no, you're not doing this. Well, he consistently said, I can do this. I've fought off bears and lions while I protect the sheep. I can do this. Saul relents and finally gives him his suit of armor. Well, the suit of armor that he put on was way too heavy. So David takes it off. He goes out in just his, T-shirt and shorts and his sandals, and he picks up some smooth rocks from the river, and he goes to Goliath. Well, when Goliath saw David coming, he was shocked and laughed. He goes, am I a dog that you come with me with sticks? He cursed David, and of course he's laughing at him. And he thought he was going to just be able to take down this little boy like that. And he further said to him, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and beasts of the fields. Well, Goliath's sarcasm and threats did not scare David at all. He said to the giant, you come to me with a sword and javelin and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts and the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. David went even further and said, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you down and cut off your head. I'm sure Goliath is rolling with laughter at this, right? He's like, he probably pitied the boy on some level, I would imagine. So they came together, And David picks up his sling, puts a rock in it, slings it, and smack dab hits Goliath, smack dab in the middle of the forehead. It sank into his forehead, and he fell over. And so then David came running up, grabbed the Goliath's sword, cut off his head. Of course, the Philistines are terrorized by this. They run, but they ended up surrendering and having the defeat of this war between the two. So, as many of you know, that we have been studying the 12 powers that were formulated by Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity. And those 12 powers we're studying, one every month. So, and the 12 powers are actually potential that we all have. The disciples all had a certain trait or ability, and we have those as well. But they're only potential. It's only in potential that we have it. And Charles Fillmore, he says that basically we have to consciously engage in these powers and take responsibility for developing, refining, and transmuting our spiritual and creative potentials. So we all have potentials. But if we don't know what those powers are that we could use to create a world that works for everyone, how does that work for us? So that's why we're studying these. So in the story of David and Goliath, for those of you who know what the 12 powers are, which power do you think that is demonstrated most in this story? There's a lot of answers. I heard power. That's a good one. What was it? Persistence. What? Faith. You know what? And the thing is there's more than one. But the one I'm going to, and whoever said persistence, it is a part of that. And so the spiritual power that we're studying this month is called strength. Now, strength is defined by Linda Martello Whitsett in the book Divine Audacity. If you really want a more contemporary study of the 12 powers, Divine Audacity by Linda Martello Whitsett is one of the books. There's another book, I'll speak about that one next week. But she breaks it down, and she says the definition of this strength that we're referring to, spiritual strength is our capacity to stand undaunted in the midst of shifting circumstances, to act courageously and to stay the course. It is to stand undaunted in the midst of shifting circumstances, to act courageously and to stay the course, which is what I think someone mentioned, and that was persistence, that part. Now, our strength can be on 3 different levels. There's physical strength, bodybuilders, or you have physically strong, and you have strong muscles, and you can do a lot of things physically. There's mental strength. That's when you make a decision and you follow through and you stay the course, regardless of what the other parts of you are saying. You make a line of what you're going to do, strength. And then there's the highest level of strength, spiritual strength. And what I see, the spiritual strength is knowing who we are. Spiritual strength is really knowing and embodying who we are as God beings. And that is principles 1 and 2 in the 5 principles. Again, if you're new to Unity or you want a refresher on Unity, I highly recommend 5 Principles by Ellen Davenport. She's right on point and really breaks these down. It's an easy read. I don't know if it's easy, but it's relatively easy. But it's a lot to digest to see Unity's perspective. So it's about knowing that something within us, as I said in the meditation, is far greater than that which is in the world. And it's about being so convinced of our godness that we can face Goliaths. To be so convinced that we don't get sucked up into the fear consciousness that rules this world. Because we're anchored. We're anchored in truth. We're anchored in light and love. And she breaks it down into 3 components in Divine Audacity, and the book is here. She says that the three components are stability and courage and tenacity, and I'll be speaking on those two in the upcoming weeks. But the one I'm focusing on today is stability. Take a breath. To be stable is to be rooted in or anchored to a firm foundation. The stabilizing power of strength is our capacity to anchor ourselves securely in the truth of our unlimited source of calm, safety, and balance. We can stand strong during times of change. Strength is our power of standability. Now, she talks about a muscle-bound weightlifter exemplifies strength in the physical body. Standing firmly, he is rooted, but one wrong move can cause him to become unsteady. In addition, those built-up muscles might be stiff and rigid and tight. So most likely you won't see a muscle-bound person enjoying a yoga session. The fact is, the stabilizing power of strength, spiritual strength, is not just sturdiness, but it's also flexibility. To be sturdy is to be anchored and sturdy and stable, but to be flexible. In the Tao, it points to the Tao Te Ching, the Tao points to the paradoxical truth that rigidity is not consistent with this power. Successful application of strength allows for firm resolve in the truth we know, as well as flexibility to respond to situations presenting themselves moment to moment. So it's about anchoring ourselves, to anchor, because the winds of change blow, the storms come in, and what keeps you from falling over? Or I like the other word besides being planted and grounded, to be anchored. So if you were in a boat on the water, which is all about emotion, you're anchored. And so the winds can come, but you're not going to get capsized because you're solid, you're anchored. So to be anchored and to be solid and to be planted, what is it we're to be planted in? And I mentioned this in the meditation, to be planted in truth. Truth principles, and I'm going to put the word principles in there because a principle is something that is always the same all the time for everyone. Because there's the small t truth, and my small t truth may not be the same as Jerry's small t truth or Larry's. It's the small t truth, but it's the capital T. Truth principles that work all the time for everyone, everywhere. We need to be grounded in those. So what are truth principles to be grounded in? Well, unity has 5 of them. We have 5 principles, and that work all the time, everywhere, for everyone. If you look at it, if you study, that's what Charles Fillmore studied. He studied, and he looked at what are the principles that are across all ways. Principle number 1, God is. Spirit is, whatever you call that, force and source, the power and presence, God is. Well, since God is everyone and everything, then that means principle number 2 is I am a God being, and so is everybody else. We often don't want to claim our own divinity. That's the biggest struggle, I think, for most folks, is to know that I am the divine. But Jesus, the great way shower and teacher, said, "Know ye not that ye are gods." It's okay to claim your divinity, but know that you're not elevating yourself over everybody else because everybody else is a God being too. That's where we get into trouble. God is not up here. God is right here, same level. So then we have God is, I am, and then the next one is I think. And I like to put the word believe because our thoughts are creating all the time. That's what we teach. Our thoughts are things. You think enough about something and you believe it, you then receive it and achieve it. Principle number 4, I pray. And to me that means that I affirm and I accept the truth of God is abundance. We are whole, perfect, and complete beings despite the appearances, because we want to see past the appearances. And number 5 principle is I live. I live the truth of those other 4 principles. I don't just speak them. It is my core of my being. So, to be anchored in truth principles, my question is, what are you planted in? How deep are you planted? What are you planted in? How do you know if you're planted in truth principles or not? Well, you see how you react to the situations in life. Things are always changing, and we have opportunities all the time. Our world is crazy. Would you agree? I mean, honestly, we have systematic racism, which is inherent in the air that we breathe. We cannot not be in the racism of our world. We have mental illnesses. We have gun control. We have violence and abuse on many levels. We have homelessness. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. And I don't know about you, but that can be overwhelming. Anybody? To be honest, yes, it is overwhelming. That is the Goliath. Okay? The Goliath represents anything that feels overwhelming in the world. Racism is a Goliath. Homelessness is a Goliath. We have Goliath all over the place. And not only in the world, but in our personal lives. We have our own personal Goliaths, whether we want to admit it or not. It's what we're afraid of. See, Goliath is that thing that scares you the most. So we have Goliaths, and there's not just in the world, it's in here. The University of Santa Monica, they taught us a line. How you relate to the issue is the issue. I want you to say that with me. How you relate to the issue is the issue. That I'm going to give you to contemplate that this week. Because think about it. It's how we relate to the issue. So we have Goliaths in our consciousness that is an outpicturing in our world. So, because everything is metaphysical, well, we also have a David. See, we have the potential of David. And the David, who's David in our consciousness? I have a Goliath in my mind, fears, doubts, worries, big things. David is the young man who has not been contaminated by fear-based consciousness. He has not bought into the illusions of the world. He's anchored in the truth. He's anchored. And we need to be anchored like David. So, would you like to know how David gets anchored and why he's anchored? So we can develop and engage more in our David self and face these Goliaths? Would you? Yes. Everybody? Yes. Okay. So basically, David spends time in nature. Okay. So spend time in nature. He spends time out in nature. He avoids the crowds and the places of illusion and those thoughts of others. And he guards his sheep. You know what your sheep represent? Your thoughts. He guards the sheep because the sheep are going to wander. We have wandering thoughts. Our thoughts will go down back alleys if we let them. One of my favorite lines from Emerson is, "Stand guard at the portal of your mind." Say that with me. Stand guard at the portal of your mind, because there will be thoughts that want to invade and be predators and take you down and take you off the truth if you allow them, the temptation. And so we need to guard our thoughts. If it is not an uplifting truth thought, dismiss it and replace it with the truth. Next, he stays true to what he knows, okay? He doesn't take on the armor and the fears of Saul. I mean, he could put the armor on, but that was fear-based. He had the armor, like this, of faith. His armor was one of faith. He wore the armor of faith. He went unafraid because he knew who he was. He knew that the God within him was greater than that Goliath. And last but not least, he goes and he slays the giant, that fear-based thinking in his head. How does he do that? By taking the stone. The stone represents truth. He takes the truth and he points it right dab smack in the right in the imagination, because our imagination is sometimes the place where we can run amok, right? We imagine the worst of things. And the third eye as well. He hits right here, the only place there's no armor on the giant of Goliath. So he takes that stone of truth and he throws it straight and sinks it in his forehead, takes him down, and he takes the sword and he chops off his head. Chops off the head. That part of us that is our fears, doubts, and worries. He chops it off. Just takes, okay, that part is just trying to run me. Anybody? Where my mind is not in control. It wants to control. That is the job of the mind, by the way. Its job is to protect us, keep us safe, always looking for danger. Very fear-based. It's about survival. But when we're anchored in the truth, we thrive, not to survive. So we need to be planted, as is David. So how do you apply David's methodology in your life? Well, first of all, just spend more time in nature, right? Spend time in nature. Nature is our home. Connect. Refrain from spending time with negative people and negative things. Fearful people and situations. We need to stay away. Doesn't mean you ignore them completely, but don't immerse yourself. Don't put yourself in that consciousness, because it'll go in. Be mindful of what you feed your mind. What we feed our mind and think about, we bring about. If we're worried about something, we're going to continue being in that. And then we want to stand our guard at the portals of our mind, so when those little thoughts want to pull us off, we cut them off by applying the stone of truth. We want to have the standards of truth. And what is the standard of truth? It's one of the 5 principles. Now, if you need assistance, if you need assistance with knowing what the statement of truth is when you face your Goliath, I invite you this week or today, what is the thing you fear the most? And think about it. And what is the statement of truth that can take down that fear? Because we need to plant ourselves, water that seed of truth, and so that we are deeply grounded. You know, we're all angels who only have one wing. And we need each other to fly. We need each other to fly. You know, we're not supposed to do this thing called life alone. We need each other. There was a little boy who was trying to pick up this really heavy stone. And his father said, "Are you trying with all your strength?" And the little boy looks at him and, "Of course I am. I'm trying with all my strength." And his father looked at him and said, "No, you're not using all your strength. You haven't asked for help, my help. Okay? To ask for help is to have strength. We sometimes are proud. I can do it myself. I'm guilty, and yet we're here to be with each other. So I'm going to close with the secret of the giant redwoods. Giant redwoods only grow in the west coast of America. The strength and size of the redwoods is stunning. These giants stand so close together that their branches filter out the sun and seem to touch the clouds. Many of these trees have scars, burn scars, recalling fires of the past. And some even have huge caverns where people can actually stand within them. And yet, they still are growing. Having adapted to their wounds and injuries, these redwoods continue to be full of life. Unlike the palm tree, whose taproots go down into the ground as deep as the tree is tall. So 30 feet up, 30 feet down go the taproots. The redwood has no taproots. That's why you never see a redwood standing alone. It wouldn't have the stability to stand upright. Redwoods are always in groups called groves. And the might is not in the tree itself, because for every foot it grows up, the redwood sends out its roots 3 times the distance, not down, but out. If the tree is 300 feet tall, its roots go out 900 feet, intertwining with the groping roots from the other redwoods in the grove. By the time a few hundred years go by, their roots are so woven with each other, there's no way a tree can fall down. It is held up by the strength of its community. We are redwoods. We are here to stand together. I'm a believer in social action. Unity believes in social action. A few years ago, there was a social action survey given out. I have the survey, and I am looking to resurrect social action and activity because we are the change that we seek in the world. I need to do something. I'm not sure what. I have a social action interest paper out there for you to sign up on. We will together stand together and make this world a place that works for everyone. I thank you for being the redwood, for working together as a community, because we're standing together. And so it is.